video we're going to go through every single step of preparing your 41-inch edge for flight, and so we'll start with unwrapping the components and unboxing them. So your 3D Hobby Shop 41-inch edge arrives in a strong cardboard box. All the pieces are inside, taped down, wrapped in non-marring film. So we're going to release all of the tape, holding the plane into the box, and remove each piece, and we'll set them out for inspection. Don't yank on the tape. You can easily break the delicate balsa wood components of your airplane if you were to just yank and pull them out of the box. Instead, take your time, release each piece from the tape, and draw them out one at a time. Okay, now we have the pieces out of the box. We're going to remove the tape as necessary to gently remove the pieces from their poly bags. Again, no pulling, no jerking is necessary. Take the time, cut the tape, get everything out of the bag safely and smoothly. This is out of the box, everything's laid out, and we can inspect all the parts. Now, these pieces were placed in the box at the factory with no wrinkles in the covering. If you can see, I've just pulled a set of fresh parts out. There are no wrinkles in the covering. Now, if you live in an extreme climate, especially high altitude or a very dry climate, then the moisture is going to be pulled out of the wood of your airplane at a very rapid rate. And when you pull the airplane out of the box, you may see wrinkles on some of the components. If you don't see them now, you will see wrinkles as the wood structure of your airplane adjusts to the climate in your area. Particularly, again, if you're at high altitude or in a very dry climate, the wood on the airplane is going to dry out and shrink at a rapid rate, and you'll see wrinkles appear on the covering of your aircraft. This is entirely normal. When we cover the airplanes, we cover them at low altitude, in a moist climate with high humidity, and the wood is a certain size and shape. Wood's a natural material. It absorbs and releases water according to the humidity in the air and the altitude. And so if your climate is different than the climate where we covered these, you're going to have some changes, and it's going to develop some wrinkles. Sunlight will accelerate this process. So the first time you take your plane out in the sun, expect to see some wrinkles pop up. Now, this airplane has no wrinkles on it, so I can't use it to show you how to fix any wrinkles. So I'm going to switch to a different airplane that we've had out in the sun, and I'm going to show you how to fix wrinkles. 1-inch 3D Hobby Shop AJ Slick. In construction technique, it's extremely similar to your 41-inch edge. We left this fuselage outside on a hot day for several hours. This caused the wood of the fuselage to shrink, and in some areas it developed some wrinkles because the covering does not shrink in the sunlight. So as the fuselage shrinks a little bit, you're left with excess covering, which bunches up in wrinkles. You can see the wrinkles run the long direction because that's the way the grain of the balsa wood inside is running, and that's the direction that balsa wood shrinks. The grains themselves shrink in diameter. So the wrinkles in the covering run along the grain of the wood. Now the tool I'm going to use to fix these wrinkles is a heat gun. It's not a hair dryer. A hair dryer is not even nearly hot enough to shrink covering. So this is a hobby or craft heat gun. The particular one that I'm using is a Hanger 9. It's an excellent brand of heat gun, and it has two settings: low, the single line, and the double line for high. I'm going to put it on the high setting. It takes a moment for the heat gun to heat up, so I'm going to do that off camera. And then what I'm going to do is come in and I'm going to move the heat gun along the wrinkles. I'm not going to stop in one place for very long, or else I could overheat the covering and melt it in that spot. I'm going to hold the heat gun 3 or 4 inches away. I'm going to use some patience, and I'm going to let the heat of the heat gun do the work as I move the gun. And there will, as I wave the heat gun over the wrinkled covering, I'll be able to tell when the covering reaches the correct temperature. It's called the activation temperature, because the wrinkles will start to shrink out. And although it's difficult to see wrinkles on camera, we'll do this a couple of times so you can get an idea of how this looks as you're going over it. And that's how long it took. We now have a perfectly smooth fuselage turtle deck area on this 51-inch AJ slick. The shrinking procedure for your 41-inch edge is exactly the same. Use your heat gun, move it along the wrinkles, but don't stop in one place for very long, because the heat from the heat gun is pretty intense, and if you're not careful, you'll melt a spot right where you stop your heat gun. So always keep it in motion and never stop it for very long in one place. Shrinking wrinkles out of other surfaces is exactly the same. The only other caution you'll have to use is if you're shrinking a wrinkle on your tail surfaces, you'll need to make sure that you don't allow the tail surfaces to twist. You'll need to hold them steady, and if they twist one direction, don't worry. Twist them back the other direction, apply a little more heat, and you'll straighten them back out again. That's how we shrink wrinkles out of airplanes. Another common covering tool is the sealing iron. Now, we don't recommend that people that are new at shrinking out wrinkles use the iron, and here's why. An iron operates through contact with the surface of the covering. And if you contact the surface of your covering and you push down on the wrinkle may not have time to actually shrink, and what you'll do is you'll crease the wrinkle into the wood of your airplane. So a very experienced person can use an iron by moving it over the surface very close without actually touching, and he can use the iron like a heat gun. This is a technique that experienced guys can use, but when you first learn to shrink out wrinkles, the heat gun is much easier, because inexperienced people, when using the iron, have a tendency to press down, and they actually make the wrinkle permanent before it has a chance to shrink out.